On today's episode of Gathering the Kings.
So honest to God story, Shaz, I got onto Facebook and I said to everybody I know, and I've been online since 94. So I have a whole bunch of people on social. And I said, hey, I have an opportunity to do a show. And what should it be called?
Yeah.
Right. And within 48 hours, no joke, there's about 120 suggestions. And then people were chastising me, like this was a Friday, so Saturday, Sunday, they were chastising me for having not selected yet.
Oh.
And so I turned it to them and I said, look, you know what? I want plausible deniability. You guys pick the name, right?
Yeah.
And it ended up being The Raad Life.
You are listening to Gathering the Kings with Chaz Wolfe, featuring fellow 7, 8, and even 9-figure business owners who have real battle scars from business and life, but have prevailed as the king that they are designed to be. We welcome high-performing entrepreneurs to the stage in order to reveal the real of the real on what it takes to build a successful business today. We dissect the good and bad decisions they've made along the way that give a true and accurate picture of the journey of success and how you too can get there. Through this dialogue, you will learn the value of growing your network and surrounding yourself with power players and kings like today's guest. Grab your pen and notebook because we're about to dive in.
All right, everybody, Gathering the Kings. Welcome back, Chaz Wolfe. I've got Raad Ghantous here with us. Welcome to the stage, Raad.
Thank you, Chaz. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. And we were just chatting about your name, and names are so important. And I know you and I have had so much organic, authentic conversation off air to this moment. But since were just for a second there talking about your name, and did you find that? I mean, you've run a podcast for a long time. Like how have names played into you and your show and just your history? Like names are so important, I think,
So it's interesting because there's a couple of things. I live in a town called San Clemente in Southern California, and it's a surf town. It's known for surf spots, breaks, all that stuff. I'm a scuba diver. I've never surfed a day in my life, right?
Okay.
And my name's spelled R-A-A-D. So everybody wants to call me Rad, right?
Right.
And I feel like a complete imposter because I don't surf. And people are calling me Rad. So I fought it for the longest time. And I would say, no, it sounds like R-O-D, but it's just spelled like that. And it's actually a functional word in the Arabic language. It means thunder. So see, the more I talk about this, the worse it's going to get, right? So, now we're talking Native American iconic elements and spirit animals, right? But it actually is a functioning word in the Arabic language. So I would always tell people, no, it's Raad. It's like there's a pause between the two A's kind of, right?
Right.
Well, then about 7 years ago, I walked into a show. Somebody brought me in as a guest for a podcast back early days, like covered wagon days of podcasts, right? And the guy who owns the radio station was talking about baby boomers and aging and some of the issues that we don't really talk about. In my professional capacity as an interior designer, we do modifications for people's homes so they can stay in them longer, becoming more and more critically important now as we get more and more aging generation, right? Yeah. And multi-generations, people taking care of parents and so forth. So the guy says, hey, we would be interested in doing a podcast on, maybe like, baby boomers. Would you be interested in doing it? Well, I said, I'm not a baby boomer. I missed it by 1 year. She says, don't worry, we'll call you a baby boomer wannabe and we'll just do the show. Well, now, so it's just, okay, fine, whatever. I think I was like Jim Carrey for 6 months. I said yes to everything. Came my way. I just turned 50 and I'm going, this is bonus zone right now. This is all extra time on my part, right?
Exactly.
So this is a very true story. So I'm like, well, how do you do this? And he told me, and I had never been told, you and I had this conversation about like voice for radio, never had been told anything even close to that. And ever since it's like, well, of course you're doing a show with a voice like that. I'm like, I never really thought about it. Like the closest probably was, I'm a fan of Looney Tunes and Mel Blanc and voiceovers. And I thought, well, maybe I'll do, a Daffy Duck or something at one point. Yeah. But so he goes, this is the thing, you go and get this done and then you get a voiceover and you get some music selected and whatever. So now we got to select the name for the show. So honest to God story, Shaz, I got onto Facebook and I said to everybody I know, and I've been online since 94. So I have a whole bunch of people on social. And I said, hey, I have an opportunity to do a show. And what should it be called?
Yeah.
Right. And within 48 hours, no joke, there's about 120 suggestions. And then people were chastising me, like this was a Friday, so Saturday, Sunday, they were chastising me for having not selected yet. Oh. And so I turned it to them and I said, look, you know what? I want plausible deniability. You guys pick the name, right? Yeah. And it ended up being The Raad Life.
Wow.
Right. And it's fun. And it's funny because I'm like, okay, screw it. I'm done fighting this. I am giving up. Okay. Yep. It's the rad life. It got to the point where, because what you see is what you get with me. I mean, whether I'm on camera or not, this is who I am. So I would do things and I would share things, and people basically started using the term rad life as an adjective. Yeah. And they would say, oh, well, of course you would do that. It's the rad life. It's the rad life.
Yeah.
Naturally. So I actually gave up. I started sitting on my car now. It's on my license plate, right? So it sounds like ROD, but I have become, as I've aged, I have become accepting of the fact that if you're going to call me rad, fine, call me rad.
And might as well make it the rad life. I just love how you've embraced it. It's your identity now. It's who you are. So you've actually always been. You just didn't know it.
Yeah. And sometimes, how funny life is that way. Sometimes you just got to get out of your own way. Yeah.
That's right. I love it. Well, tell us, Raad, what type of business, you kind of mentioned it briefly there, but tell us a little bit more about the business and what it is that you do professionally.
So I'm a professional interior designer. We specialize in, I will use it loosely as hospitality projects. Meaning spas, wellness centers, pretty much anything that sits in a hotel property in terms of different functions. So you got restaurants, bars, you got spas, you have accommodations, right? And I'm using that word versus guest rooms because we also now do like assisted living, memory care. So it's projects of that nature. And what usually happens, and I've been doing that since 2003 under my own flag. Prior to that, I worked for a couple of really large, heavy hitters in the industry. Hirsch Bedner out of Atlanta. They're like number one, number two, depending on billing any year for interior design for hotels.
Wow.
And WAT&G, Wimberly Allison Tong and Goo, which is out of California, Southern California, Orange County. And there, if you selected 10 projects, hotel projects at a 5-star level and called them out, they were probably responsible. At one point, they were responsible for probably about 8 of them. Now they're probably responsible for 6 of them, or maybe 7. So I got a lot of good pedigree training at those locations. But it started even earlier for me because my dad is a civil engineer. He's since retired, but he's a civil engineer and he was on job sites. And I grew up in the Middle East, in Kuwait and Abu Dhabi. I tell people when we were in Abu Dhabi and I was young, we lived on a construction camp. Literally looked like a British colonial camp with white rocks around flagpoles, and we had a mess hall with Indian chefs from East Indian chefs that basically made curry every Friday.
Wow!
There was nothing in Abu Dhabi. There was they were building the first airport and infrastructure bridge. My mom drove 30 minutes in a white VW Bug to get groceries. And there was sand everywhere. So I grew up on job sites. I grew up on job sites where my fun was crushing concrete samples for core sample testing and seeing what the PSI would be. Can you imagine being a wrecking Ralph with that kind of machine at the age of 6?
Yeah. Exactly. Right? Yes.
It wasn't like a heavy-handed kind of like you go do engineering. I was going to go do engineering at my dad's alma mater, and it's a Jesuit university, almost like a Harvard equivalent in Lebanon, in Beirut. But there was a war going on. So I ended up going down a path of economics, and we'll come back to this. We're going back down an economics path in a university in Switzerland. I was 16 when I went to college, and ended up going down sort of the economics undergrad, went and did a master's of marketing degree at the Peter Drucker Center in Claremont.
Wow.
And then lo and behold, I find myself where I'm back on job sites, working with a friend of my dad's who came over with some inheritance money from Syria, doing some projects. And I'm back on job sites. And it's a very familiar environment for me. So then the economy in California, as far as real estate goes, in 1991 crashed. And I was like at home, like, what am I going to do with myself? And this thing comes in the mail and says, Interior Designers Institute Summer Certificate Program. And I'm like, cool. 12 weeks of arts and crafts. Let's go do arts and crafts for 12 weeks, right? And here we are, that was what, 91, 92. So 94, I graduated with another undergrad in in interior design.
Yeah.
And at that point, there was a bit more clarity. Like sometimes I think when you're young and you go to college, unless you have had a sense of purpose, you're kind of just following either what a spelled out path is for you, or sort of the next thing to do on this
stumbled into
trajectory is X, right? Like, hey, I'm going to do economics. What are you going to do after that? Well, I'm going to go either get a law degree or go teach, or I'm going to go work for the government, right? So there's certain things sometimes that are like, this is the next step.
Right.
which is interesting because, your show and, what we talk about all the time is like with the entrepreneurship spirit, I think sometimes it gets derailed.
Yeah.
I think sometimes early on you get kind of derailed. I choose to think about it now at this point in my life as not necessarily a derailment, but maybe it was additional stuff you need to pick up along the way to make it more clear for you later on. Like,
sure.
It's like, I know this is one of the things that you're going to ask me about.
I think we all can relate to that. So you're on the right thing. We can all relate to that.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I know was on your list of questions for me was like, books, right? So, the normal Stephen Covey biography of Steve Jobs, all of that stuff, fine, whatever, right? But I think it's interesting right now coming out of COVID, coming out of sort of like a reset almost for a lot of us, if you choose to look at it that way. I mean, we were forced into a reset. The question is whether you see that as it was a gift or maybe it's a combination of things. There's a book by a gentleman by the name of Ryan Holiday, who is the head of an effort called The Daily Stoic. And it's about Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, a bunch of Greeks. And he's got a couple of books. One of the books that he has, I think is an interesting read for people. It's called The Obstacle is the Way.
Okay.
And The Obstacle is the Way basically is not necessarily a business book. It talks about that sometimes those barriers or those barricades or those obstacles that get in your way are actually, in a way, there to make you go through them, to make you find the path.
Sure.
And it's an interesting way when you read that book coming out of 2 years of dealing with a pandemic.
That's right.
How we could maybe see some of these things that have happened in a different light.
Right.
And sometimes it's really all it is, right? It's that slight other side of the coin thinking when you see something. So anyway, so we do interior design. We do design build. I'm doing right now, I've got a landscape project. We're finishing an assisted living project. We're doing a cafe, a pharmacy, a restaurant, a medical spa in Beverly Hills, a couple of residential projects, which in the residential projects coming out of COVID, we're trying to bring in a layer of wellness, especially on the higher end homes. It's like we're putting in things called Zen dens, which are more like sort of a meditative space, gym, maybe steam and sauna, and geared towards the person who lives there. So it's like customized so that you can maintain a regimen of wellness in your own home, because we just found out how important it is to be healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. And not on Zoom for 17 hours a day.
Well, that's Zoom zones. That's not Zen dens. That's Zoom zones that we're doing, which because, I'll just share this with you. And for 10 years or 20 years almost now, everybody's been pushing for open floor plan. And I kind of put this image behind me on purpose, like open floor plan, right? Okay. Well, here comes COVID, and we're all sequestered, and we're all in homes, and we got some multi-generational households with grandparents, right?
Yep.
And you got to do a Zoom call, or Chaz has got to do a podcast, and you're like, where the heck do I do this? Because I can't isolate myself into a space. Right. So some of the things that we are doing, you see over here, over on this side, you'll see the screen, like sort of the metal screen and the glass. So those partitions have existed in commercial settings like WeWorks and places of that nature, right? Yep. We're starting bringing some of that stuff into the house, so you can actually seal off areas as you need them. Yeah. For some of that functioning. So again, it was an obstacle. We faced a challenge, and we were basically ready to kill ourselves or drink ourselves stupid, right? That's right. Right. But here's what can we come out of it? We come out of it with something that's actually a quality of life enhancement, enrichment, save your sanity with your family around. Yeah.
It was funny that you say that about like, where am I going to do this? The last 2 podcasts that I've recorded have been with guys that have businesses in their home, and they've been in their truck. And I've been like, hey, I just want to make sure, like, are you good? We're here to record a podcast. Are you sure you're good? And he's like, yeah, man, I got kids inside. And so like, this is the only quiet place that we're going to get. I'm like, hey, you know what? That's fantastic. It's now the mobile podcast truck. Completely fine as long as we're on the same page. But yeah, I mean, that's how it is. I mean, I walk outside the door right here, and my 2-year-old's probably downstairs doing something crazy, and I think a lot of people thought, coming out of COVID, everybody's going to go back to like sort of, oh man, I'm craving that old normal.
I think we found out that our quality of life could be better with some of our primary relationships. And now it's a matter of just how do we hybrid the situation?
Yeah.
So we all live in environments, right? And so what I find myself is we have a skill set that we can bring to bear to help people with that, whether it's because they have elder parents at home or, some bunch of people brought in their elder parents into the house during COVID because once they got clear for those first, 3 months or whatever, there was the only way for them to see them. Otherwise, they were constantly sequestered, right?
That's right.
So it's forced us to do stuff that I think in some ways we may look back at this as being a bit of a blessing. Like it was a major reset for us.
Totally.
Priorities.
Absolutely. I got to ask, at this stage in the game, like obviously you've been doing this, like you said, for multiple decades at this point now, and you've seen transition not only in like the way that you do business and the actual services, like you're talking about, like what you're doing right now today, you didn't offer probably 3 years ago, or at least not in the residential space.
Well, not even the commercial. I mean, the commercial spaces, the business has changed. When I started doing, for example, spas, it was almost like even on high-end hotel properties, it was like green fees for golf. They would give green fees away for the men, and they would give spa treatments for the women in order to basically secure the volume business, the group business, right?
Right.
So it was a loss leader. And now it has gotten to the point where you almost have to specialize in a particular side of things, whether it's like injectables or Botox or like maybe IV drips or something. Like you'll see these places that are very, very micro specified on what they offer versus being a whole wellness thing, right?
Right.
Because real estate value, the industry itself is now basically looking at how do I maximize real estate square footage for the maximum revenue generation, right? And so, whereas before, within 20 years, we went from anybody can basically be a spa director to you got to have somebody that is a very savvy, very sophisticated person.
Right.
And that applies to restaurants. Look at what happened with restaurants during COVID, right? I mean, do you think that genie's going to go back in the bottle about alcohol sales and delivery? Heck no. There's way too much margins in there, right? I mean, the outside patios, we'll see how that pencils out. In California, they're supposed to be allowed to have outside dining in makeshift patios until the end of 2023. Some cities are trying to pull back on that. And now that that has been already become part of life, it's not like a summer period. Now it's like been 2 years that we're doing something, right? Business has changed. This is the thing that sometimes people forget. It's a living, breathing thing that is constantly teaching you and asking for you to adjust.
Yeah, there's so many lessons in what you just said. So I want to try to dig into that. With you being in not only the last couple of years of changes, but just now a couple of decades, how did you get to the place where you realized that business was living and breathing so that you could accept that change happens all the time? Right. Because if you don't get to that place, then you get wrecked by it. You're like, change.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very easy to be overwhelmed by it. Very easy to I was watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel the other day, and there was a guy on there and says that he said, sometimes you just got to go through what you got to go through.
That's right.
You just got to go through with what you got to go through. It was such a side thing in the show, but it just resonated like pretty much that's it, right? Sometimes you just got to go through what you got to go through. I think for me, it was kind of an unintended blessing going through the path of an economics degree and then masters of marketing, and then going into a field like this. I tend to basically have a left brain, right brain at all times. So I'm technically in a creative field. We are a provider of creative solutions, right?
Right.
It's for me, it has never been just an aesthetic thing, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And it's always about how does this solve the problem? I mean, I'm one of those guys that basically you should not start as jigsaw puzzle in front of me because I will be stuck. I will not leave the room. I mean, it's happened over Thanksgiving because some people have this tradition of starting a jigsaw puzzle at Thanksgiving. Oh my God. That's like the worst thing for me. I walk into a place with a jigsaw puzzle and we're watching it and it's like Thanksgiving and then people are watching the football game and blah, blah. And I'm like, why are you still there at 10 o'clock, Rod? Because there's more pieces I need to put in this. If you're sort of a solver, a problem solver, and that intrigues you.
That's right.
Then I look at these businesses, and I've said this to you before off the air. I say, we design stages for people to perform their business on successfully. And I use that stage analogy just because it's a little easier for sometimes for people to understand. If you think of a theater, of a show, The staging of the show, based on the show itself, is specific.
Right.
The backdrops, even down to the scenes, setting the scenes, are specific. The lighting, the almost the sense of the space, the costumes, all of that stuff, right?
Yep.
So as businesses, especially brick and mortar businesses, although it does transcend into virtual. I mean, look at what we're doing, right? With backdrops even, right? And people working from home and having to basically Zoom in team environments, whatever.
That's right.
So what's your backgrounds? Are they going to be consistent as far as the branding for the company? Are they going to be respectful? I mean, I could have put a Hawaiian beach behind me, and I don't think I would have projected exactly the same sense of what I do, right?
Right.
So the crossroads for me, the sweet spot for me, has always been this revenue generation, brands, unique value proposition, and positioning the business in a way where it has a 5 to 7 year sustainable shelf life. Because if I always use as a benchmark, if I did my job right, if we did the space correctly, whether it's outdoor meeting space, an interior, like I said, assisted living, memory care,
right?
You don't call me for 5 to 7 years because you don't need me. You go ahead and do your business, put the money into what you needed, into operations, staffing, growing your labor force. You don't have to continue to put it back into a capital reinvestment to keep your place up and current, because shelf life is very much part of that. And if you don't believe me, look at places that open up and close, and then somebody else comes in and they switch the logos on the wall, and that's all that is, and it works as well or as badly.
Yeah.
Every business deserves, every business person who's putting their sweat and tears into a business, and in some cases the mom and pops, they're not deep pocketed, they're taking second mortgages on their house to expand their business and opportunity to provide for their families.
That's right.
If their businesses fail, there's a lot at stake.
Yeah. The ripple effect. So
they deserve a sophisticated product that will actually help them see that through. And perfect example, again, I hate to go back continuously to COVID, but it's a learning period for us. Those people who basically bucked against it, had a bunker mentality versus a growth mindset, right? They suffered, and a lot of them are not around anymore. Those who embraced a growth mindset and ended up saying, okay, well, we're going to get ahead of the curve on deliveries, all of a sudden are no longer using Uber Eats, right? They're now basically got a couple of small little electric cars, and they're delivering their own food, and they kept their people working in delivery instead of waiting on tables.
Right.
And now they are looking at a bigger business model. So we are a part of that partnership, I feel.
Yeah.
Versus just, here's a pretty space, go ahead, now, it's your thing. Like I said, even more importantly, when it's brick and mortar, and if you're in a product and service business, that's pretty much what you do. You put on a show, and people applaud by giving you money.
Yeah.
And if the show, look at this, hey, Chaz's show is really great, I would think you should go see Chaz's show. If you put on a show that actually resonates and connects, then the word of mouth is going to be, hey, you need to go to that show. And I'm using the word show as an analogy, but you need to go to that business. You need to frequent that space.
Yep. I love the analogy. I think that, and it can be, like you said, for any product, any service, any sort of business, because the show being produced will speak.
And how well you produce it, and you and I have talked about this too, how well you produce it is equally important.
Yeah. And so for just to break that down a little bit, the customer experience is in essence what you're referring to. And so when someone walks in to the show and the environment that they're in, when they're getting their ticket, whether they're getting concessions, the smell of popcorn, the whatever they're experiencing in our quote unquote show example here, how does that apply? Give me like general stuff. Like,
by the way, Chaz, well, for everything. And it even starts even earlier. It starts when you pick up the phone and you call and make that reservation.
Love it.
And I'll tell you something very simple for people to pay attention to. And it continues all the way through after you've left, by the way. Okay, we'll touch on that in a minute. But if you call a 5-star resort property, this is a perfect example, right? You call to ask them something. You call another property, and I'm not picking on any property, it's just the internal cultural training, right?
Yep.
If you call a 5-star property, chances are the answer you will get at the front desk when they pick up the phone is they will give you their name, welcome to this property, even though you physically are not walked in there, right? And they will say the following, something to the effect of, how may I be of service today?
Yeah.
Okay. Versus somewhere else may say, how can I help you?
Right.
Now listen to the difference between how can I help you, which is totally fine, and how may I be of service? So it starts from the very beginning. It starts from that 8x10 glossy ad that you saw virtually on Instagram or on some kind of ad rag that you got in your mail that says, hey, we are here and we're doing business. And what's usually in that 5x7 or, what's in that ad, right? It's a visual.
Yeah.
It's a visual usually. That's because we're very visual human animals, basically. Yeah. We're very visual. And so if the visual sets the stage, it sets the tone. Okay. So imagine when you see a clip art for a spa or a restaurant or a business, a tax place versus their actual physical entry, their actual space, right?
Yep.
Now it's okay, we'll just use a graphic guy and we'll just use some clip art. Well, that's great, but you're going to build the friggin' front desk, right? You're going to build the friggin' entry experience. Why don't you own it? Why don't you now basically have a collateral element that can be utilized and repurposed for setting the stage? Yeah. And when people walk through your door, when that expectation that you have set is met and then exceeded, you have now basically garnered yourself a customer. And when they leave and you follow up with them with the same level of attention and personalized attention at that, then they are now there for life until you fuck up, basically. Or they will ask somebody and they will share with you word of mouth, because we all know what is the most cost-effective, impactful, long-lasting kind of advertising. It's word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's word of mouth. Yeah. Right. And I'll just share this with you personally. So when I was in design school, I was doing great. It was the first time in my life where academically I was raising the bar on myself. Nice. This was a new experience for me. I was always competing, to stay within the realm of the appropriate grades for a class or getting the right things. And now it's where else can I take this? It was kind of interesting, right? Very much in the entrepreneurial spirit of things.
Absolutely.
And then I hit a wall. I just hit a wall. I couldn't design myself out of a paper bag. Wow. It was the equivalent of like a writer's block.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't force it. And this is kind of, again, way before reading Ryan Holiday's book, but the obstacle is the way. And so I didn't force it. I kind of gave it room. And this is another thing I think with entrepreneurs and people. With seasoning comes the realization that stillness is actually a powerful tool.
100%.
If you're constantly trying to push, you start constantly thinking, I got to perform like a trained circus animal on the, whatever comes my way.
Yep.
You're going to burn out. You're going to lose the passion and the joy for what you do.
That's right.
You're going to affect everybody around you in a way that makes you very unappealing. Right. And you're basically going to look around and go, this is absolutely frustrating, unsatisfactory. And why the hell am I doing it? Or worse.
Or worse.
Heaven forbid. So I left it alone. And in leaving it alone, I realized that the way I seem to design was very much because I was a product of a TV generation. And I'll share with you why, right? Because it still applies. It applies even more so, I think, now because we are in a very digital, content-driven age, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about a TV show, right? They give you like the trailer. There's the trailer. It gives you like this is what's gonna happen. This is what you can expect. It sets the expectations.
That's right.
Right. Then you go watch the movie, right, or the show, and the show builds on the seeded expectation,
right,
and meets it, right, and then it exceeds it. And what I mean by exceeds it, and this is what I found out that I did, is now that I've implanted in you what you can expect from a space.
Right.
As you travel through that space, as you engage in the functions of that space, there's certain things that may not be immediately blatantly in your face, but then you notice and you go, oh, I see what they did there. Oh, yeah, it connects directly to the synopsis of the space, the script of the story, right?
Right.
And it's storytelling. It's storytelling. Yeah. We do it all the time. We are, as human beings, I think, wired for storytelling.
Yeah. Right.
If it wasn't the case, why would podcasts as a medium be so popular?
Exactly. Yep. Why would we be here?
So it's always been like that. Like you have to tell a story through a space.
I love obviously you're tying this back to what it is that you do so well. Clearly, even your language for the listener who's paying attention. But to apply this to a listener who's probably a 6-figure business, they're trying to get to that 7-figure mark, super practical here is, okay, so I'm a service business, and everywhere from, like you said, how me or my team answers the phone to the shirt that my guy's wearing when he shows up to the house, or the presentation of the storefront when someone comes in, all the way
personalized
to
email on your your birthday that isn't just a canned, regurgitated template.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. The customer journey is really what we're defining. And so for you, you obviously play a role in a piece of that, but in your greater business, what for you has, before you got to the like, let's say the stage now of like the 7-figure plus, when you were grinding, when you were just kind of picking things up, and like you said, you were saying yes to everything. When you're in that stage, because that's more of the warrior stage, that's more of the 6-figure. I just got to say yes to everything to get enough to get to that point. Right. Where do I hone in? Is it the whole customer journey? Is it one piece over the other? Like, what would you say to that person who's like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed?
You hone in on the relationship part.
Okay. You hone in on the
relationship part. You hone in on what it is that is, why are they dealing with you? Why is it you with a capital Y, right, versus just a provider?
Yeah.
This is both scary and courageous, and you kind of like you're on the high trapeze without a net kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to believe, you got to get yourself to the point where you genuinely in your bones believe that what you're giving when you're providing is unique.
Yeah.
And in order for
valuable.
And valuable, and genuinely not just talk it, but walk the talk.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, these are basic things that we all know from day one, but we don't really trust. We don't really are willing to risk, And so when you say, like that warrior stage and you're grabbing for everything and so forth, even when I was doing that, honestly, Chaz, I knew in my DNA core that the things that I wanted to do were the things that both had two things. They were interesting, creative, challenging, and at the same time provided a genuine value for somebody, right? And if it met those criteria, then I was really happy, and I was in the zone, and I was really providing and giving it my all. And it was more or less all the time, most of the time, effortless. It was so like just part of you, right?
Yeah.
This is who you are. And so I see a lot of people who embrace what they should be, what they need to look like, versus just who you are. And if it's the right people you are dealing with, the people that are going to be repetitive customers, that are ones that are basically going to really value what you bring to the table, they want the real you. They want that genuine relationship. We talk kind of a little bit almost like a cliche. Are you transactional? Are you relational? Right?
Yeah.
Well, relational also is risky, because you got to put yourself out there. Like, you got to be you. You can't just be, I'm relational, then here's my script that I follow to be relational. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I think when it gets to that point, where you're talking between 6, 7 figures or whatever. I mean, let's talk about it as 6 to 7 value. Okay. Yeah, let's just say value, because it's life value, right?
It's a reflection of.
It's reflection of. It's not necessarily just the dollar signs, right?
Yep.
I think it really comes down to that. And I'll share with you something I encountered back in 98 when I was doing the first spa work that I was doing while I was working for Hirsch Bedner out of Atlanta. And I was stationed at the Island of Mauritius in the middle of the Indian Ocean. The island is so small that the word M, half of the letter M in Mauritius is already in the ocean. It's that small. Okay. And for people who want a reference point, so there's 3 island clusters: Mauritius, Reunion, and Rodrigo. Rodrigo was where we have a military base where we flew planes over in the Gulf War and bombed Iraq. So Mauritius is very much a hospitality country, right? Yeah. It's 5-star. There's not a lot of Americans. It's like almost like 12 hours to Paris and then 12 hours to there. But it's an amazing, beautiful, beautiful little spot in the world. So I was there because out of 3 offices, they couldn't find somebody to go over there for 3 months on white sandy beaches and tropical islands. So, I think when they asked me, all I could think of is, do they have scuba gear there, or should I basically ship mine?
Is this a trick? Am I being tricked here?
This is a Friday afternoon. You're asking me to go to an island in October. Instead of spending October to December in Atlanta, I can be in the Indian Ocean on white sandy beaches.
Right. Yeah.
Can I get back to you on Monday? Honestly. So I'm there and working on this project. Now, the project is a 5-star property. It's been operating for 25 years. They're doing a major remodel on it. They're putting in the spa. And along the way, not part of our scope per se, I was asked to see if I could help with the new staff cafeteria.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, this is the kind of property where people show up with a script from Hollywood and, a jet stream plane dropping them off for a week to 10 days to read the script.
Right.
A villa, which at the time was about $900 a night, right? People leave their Rolex watches on the counter, their laptops, they run to the beach, and there's that kind of place.
Yeah.
So what made that place that way? It was the staff.
Yeah.
Can you imagine having a staff that was disgruntled in a place like that where they're trying to basically convey that kind of service? It was never going to happen.
Never going to happen.
So we're doing this cafeteria. And I'm purposely not saying the name of the property because this is not necessarily a positive thing about the property when it comes to this. They saw it through, but okay. So the cafeteria was for the staff. And they're taking all these like old artwork and things from the old guest rooms and replacing them with all new, right? I was sitting there in one meeting one morning, and they were talking about how they didn't want to be a 5-star property anymore. They wanted to be a 6-star property. There's no such thing as a 6-star property.
Right.
It doesn't exist. So 5 diamond, 5-star. But they wanted to be that.
Yeah.
The same afternoon of that day, I sat in on a meeting where we're talking about finishing out the staff cafeteria. Mm-hmm. And the same people who wanted to achieve a 6-star level were the ones that were trying to literally do the bare minimum for the staff cafeteria. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you guys want to be a 6-star property and you don't realize that you are needing to basically care for your staff.
Yeah.
That is providing that kind of service.
Exactly.
So, and it was very simple. We repurposed some of the stuff that was coming out of these rooms that the staff had been working in where the guest experience was for 25 years. And we made that part of their cafeteria experience. We treated them like they are a valuable resource.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about relationships, we talk about really wanting to go from that 6 to the 7. It really comes down to this. You got to be who you are. You got to be willing to show who that is. You're be willing to basically be humble, efficient, bring what you bring to the table. But you also got to basically really care for that relationship. You can't just pretend to care for people. When it's at that level, the people you're dealing with know. They know. They can see it a mile away.
100%. Yeah. Anybody can have a business. Anybody can start something from scratch and get it to a specific level without having to care. We've all experienced that business. But to your point, to get it to the level where there's an experience that this is a long lasting thing, whether it's a shop, whether it's a service company, a home service, whatever it is, if this company is going to be around for 10, 50, 100 plus years, there's going to be an experience.
Why do people keep going to that same Italian restaurant where the guy basically greets them at the door like they're part of family?
Right. They love it.
Because there's other places that open. There's Luna Girls that open. There's all this stuff open. Why do we still go to that Italian restaurant?
Yeah.
2-3 times a week. Yeah. Right. I mean, you can't. It's a legacy. You can't just be working. I mentioned this to you. Part of where I'm at right now, too, is very clearly you can work for a living. Right. Where I am right now is it's not enough. I got to work for a legacy.
Yeah.
And the legacy has to be it's not a grandiose, it's all about me, build me a statue. It's a legacy of what are you really leaving behind?
What's left? Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that's huge. And I think that, using the warrior king language, like we like to, it's like, you have to become the warrior, right? To win some battles. You got to fight off the enemy. You got to grow your business. You got to nose to the grindstone. It's got to be selfish almost even. It's got to be about you for a period of time.
Right.
But at some point you have to start looking outwards. You got to build your team. You got to look at your community, your family. I'm trying to figure out how to spend more time with my 3, 5, and 8-year-old as opposed to not, because we don't have a finite resource. Some resources we can then use to buy others, like time. So I love where you're talking your head's at there as far as legacy. Okay, Raad, speed round, right? First question is this. if you could only pick one metric in your business to track forever and ever, what would it be?
That's of real value. Return business, repeat business. I would, that would be it for me, because that's really what is meaningful. If we've done our job right, then they're coming back. When I say repeat business, it could also include referrals through repeat business.
Yeah.
I think that would be the only metric that really is value for me.
That's good. There's been a lot of talk about experience today, and that ties right into that. Obviously, if you provide the experience and then value, then they're going to refer and or come back themselves. I love that.
Our old slogan used to be, we don't design interiors, we design experiences.
I love that. Yeah. Which I think actually every business should listen. They should write that down. So say it to us one more time, because I just heard it, but I want to hear it again.
We don't design interiors. We design experiences. And when I say experiences, it's not just the physical space and the experience you get from the physical space. Us dealing with the client.
Yeah, I love that. We don't design.
Did you get all that, Jeff?
Yeah. It finally came through to us. We design experiences, and I think that we all, as entrepreneurs, are designing experiences, even in our own life. If we can even tie that back to what we're just talking about, as far as time being luxury, if we don't design our calendar, our life, which includes the time, the stillness, then the experience that we have isn't going to be high quality either, and we're not going to come back.
So here's the truth. So again, the old slogan used to be forever, and it was a flippant thing. I said it a while ago, and then somebody quoted me on it, and I realized, wait a minute, we've got a slogan, and it was, we don't design interiors, we design experiences. We changed it recently to designs for your life, right? Because of exactly what you just said. And you're right. If you don't, by the way, if you don't design it, it gets designed for you. By circumstance, by other external inputs, pulls on your time. Yeah, it's all about experience. Yep. Your own experience, by the way, as well as the experience that's projected.
That's right. So much that goes into that. I love it. Okay, so do you intentionally network or mastermind with other entrepreneurs?
I'm doing it right now, aren't I?
I would say so.
Yeah, I do.
Real quick, what have you gotten from a value perspective, like rubbing shoulders with other guys or gals in the industry or just business?
Well, you can't be really an entrepreneur without being always curious and always open and learning, right? That's one thing that I think identifies that breed of people, is that we're constantly learning. We're constantly curious. We're constantly, in a way, admitting to ourselves that we don't know everything. We need more, right? I think the balance of that with the rest of your life is where we get into trouble sometimes and where we don't. Yeah. And you're smiling because I know you know what I'm talking about. So I think the networking it has to be of value. And I think the only way you start realizing how to value or how to identify valuable networking is when you have gone through enough of it that isn't.
Yeah, no, that's good.
When you've done enough BNIs and you've done enough, the tips, and you've done all of that stuff, and you got to go through it to know. Yep. You learn in a quick time or a long time, whatever. It's all about relationships. And by the way, the networking sometimes isn't just necessarily so like end goal focused. It's more. Sometimes the real valuable networking is the stuff that's the longer term return. Right. Yes. Because again, we go back to what we were talking about. It's relationships. You and I sitting here, we've had a couple of conversations. I think we gel and we have a synergy, and I think over time it'll just get better. But, if you go into a situation where, what I'm asking for is this, those are a transactional kind of networking. Yep. Right. And they have their place. Yep. But the real valuable networking, the stuff that's with you, that's a foundational part of your life, of who you become, of how you grow. That stuff you need to be selective. Yeah. And I think as you get more seasoned in life and you get older, maybe just seasoned, because it doesn't really have to do anything with age, you start being a little more selective where your networking is, where you, again, spend your time.
Yeah. And like time equals money or effort. To your point earlier, the new luxury is time. And so when you're considering your time or the money that you're spending to do these things, it's not just the return of money necessarily, but sometimes it is. I love the perspective of the relationship, because that's genuinely how I feel. And I think a lot of folks in business want it to be like that, but they just haven't really found that place where they can do it. And so I think that's great that we can agree on that.
Though unfortunately, the way the things that are set up are very transactional.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the way things are is very quarter return, right? It's not long-term strategy. I mean, I remember being in business school, we talked about how the Japanese had an upper hand because they basically planned their return strategies over a 5-year period versus a quarterly return, right? So any negotiation with Americans with the mindset of quarterly returns, they were at a disadvantage because the Japanese could wait them out, basically. And the longer they stayed quiet and still, the more we gave away, because we needed to seal that deal. So I think we need to maybe start considering not saying time is money anymore and start saying things like time is value.
Yeah. Love that. Very good. Okay. Last question, Raad.
Yes.
If you lost it all, what would you do?
I mean, other than just go, open a little falafel shack on some beach somewhere.
Well, if that's the answer, we want to hear about it. What would you do? Well, like if you lost it all, like what would your mindset be? And then physically, what would your action be?
Knowing what I know right now in terms of what would be your pursuit of happiness, I think I would there's a reality of life. We need to basically be able to sustain ourselves. We need to be able to deal with the world like it is. And there's a financial component to it. The question is, what would you do to do that? And where is your sweet spot for contentment and acceptance of, like real gratitude of being fulfilled. Right. So at this point, I think, again, the reason why I don't think I would ever stop doing what I'm doing is because I get a thrill out of solving problems.
Right.
Now, if I was to do something that was a business venture, that was sort of a passionate pursuit, that was completely like, I don't really care how much, as long as it's enough to sustain me, I don't know. I'd probably open up like a scuba diving outfit somewhere near water, and probably there will be next door to it some sort of Mediterranean falafel restaurant or something. You can't just scuba dive; you got to eat too.
You got to eat afterwards.
Right. And it's funny because now that you've asked me this, and I haven't really thought about it ever to any kind of level of depth other than being flippant about it. Is it actually would provide me the ability to interact with people that I would find, there's no layers sometimes when it's scuba diving or sitting around eating something with your feet in the sand. There's a certain rawness to it, right? Yeah. And so I think that would feed my networking needs. That would feed my relational needs. That would probably put money in my pocket.
Yeah.
And I could probably shut it down at 5:00 when the sun goes down because we can't scuba dive anymore.
You can't scuba dive anymore. Raad, I hear a new thing coming potentially.
I'll let you know whether we call it Raad something or the other.
Yeah, exactly. The Raad life. You can get your scuba dive and your curry
and your falafel.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Okay. Well, Raad, honestly, dude, you have provided us a fresh perspective. I think that anybody listening today was able to take away multiple pieces of, wow, that's great. Let me write that down. So thank you for your service today. For all of us listening. Yeah, absolutely. You've been incredible.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, man. It's always a good time spending with you.
Yeah, well, that's great. And we wish you the best of luck in all of your experiences that you're designing, as well as potentially the new shop with diving. You just never know. So
I don't know, Chaz, you sound like you want to either get us some certification in scuba diving or getting some Mediterranean food, but you're welcome anytime.
I was going to say, you got to have me out. I mean, naturally, right? This is what relationships are for. Right?
Of course. Where else are you going to do your podcast next?
Exactly. We got to do one live right there on the beach. You're going to be the only guy. So this will be great. Well, Raad, thanks so much for coming. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a great day, Chaz. Thank you again.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Gathering the Kings. We hope you got a ton of value today and learned a thing or two about taking your business to 7 figures and beyond. If you desire more and want a community around you to help you get there, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com. That's gatheringthekings.com. And I want you to apply for our next Becoming a King 90-day intensive. We are extremely exclusive by nature as a group. What that means is that we're really wanting only the entrepreneurs who take their business and targets super serious to apply. So if that's you think you got what it takes to level up your business, I want you to go to gatheringthekings.com and apply. And we will see you on the other side.